So exciting in our new space. Today's our soft opening, as we're calling it. So turn out for our soft opening. I thought I'd talk about, so the idea today is a shorter talk and then more time to interact with each other a little bit. So I thought I'd talk about what's called the 3 merits, or 3 ways to attain merits, right? And merit, I think for most of us, we think of it as something I get that I'll, get a promotion, or something will come back to me better and make things better. And there's certainly that kind of implication in the Buddhist world. And I'd like to suggest that it's ease. Merit is ease. Mostly we want to accrue merit because we think it will bring us more ease. When you say, like, you get a better position and so you have more things. So I wonder if we can think of merit as ways to be able to access more ease. So the 3 ways to do that are, right, classically, dana. These are Pali words. Dana, usually translated as generosity. Sila, usually translated as morality or ethical conduct. And then third is bhavana, which is usually translated as meditation. Gilfrans does also translate it as mental and emotional development. So that's usually the way it goes. In the West, we tend to flip it. So I'll start with bhavana, because for most of us, when we come to practice in the West, we come to meditate. What you say? We come to learn how to meditate. And in fact, as we were trying to, consolidate our website stuff and trying to write up a advertising or marketing promo for Port to tell them who, the membership here, who we are, we decide, okay, well, we'll call it as you know, I've been moving away from the sitting group to follow East Bay Meditation Center, in the sense of that felt really difficult or not descriptive for people who it's difficult to sit. So they've been calling it a practice group, and I appreciate that. Anyway, when we were talking about it, we thought, well, it's a meditation group, right? And that people might have a sense of what that is. And whether I say it's an East or West or not, for most of us, that's the basis of our practice, is meditation. And it's very much so in Soto Zen. So irregardless whether it's here or elsewhere. So I think meditation group still hold. So meditation, I was at the POC a couple weeks ago at East Bay, and someone yelled out when I said, okay, does anyone need meditation instruction? And someone said, what is meditation? Right? And I was like, well, come up, sit up front if you really want to know what meditation is. And there was some back and forth. So meditation, do you guys want to take a guess, a gander? What is meditation? Now you're afraid. Stillness.
Present.
Being present.
Being present in a way.
Mm-hmm. Being present.
I define it as just something that's unique to you, because I feel like different Christians have meditation too, in my opinion. But
what is meditation?
I think it's case by case, actually, but it's some sort of contemplative practice with different parameters depending on your personal beliefs, I guess.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Concentration.
Non-dualism, removing the barrier between the mind and the body.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, non-attachment.
Non-attachment. Okay.
It's directing one's attention in a particular focused way.
Directing one's attention in a particular focus way. Very nice.
Too many things not meditation.
Uh-huh. Okay. Do you have a hand?
I mean, just being.
Just being. Anyone else?
Consciousness. Consciousness, yeah. It's kind of, yeah, like an awareness.
Oh, and you mean like in a conscious way?
Yeah, I think there's something, I mean, like directed, but not necessarily directed, but I think there's some sort of like a consciousness that you're having with your mental and body and, you know, that state.
Mm-hmm.
But you can focus on different things, but I think, and you could be doing different things, like a walking meditation or something like this.
Okay. You said something already, right? Because I saw a hand. Okay. What was it?
Concentration.
Concentration. Well, classically, it is concentration and mindfulness in the Pali Canon, right? In this listing. So let's talk about it. So concentration. So it is, as most of you have taken the meditation training, the craft of meditation is very much about concentration, right? How to focus your attention, right, in a very conscious way, and not only are you able to focus it, but sustain the focus. So that's important, and I think that's useful without a doubt, because our mind is, you know, all over the place. Monkey mind, it's rattling, so to speak. It vacillates, right? It likes, dislikes, and is confused, basically. So it's always fluttering. When I think of that, I always think like weeble wobbles, you know, but they don't fall down. It's always just a little bit fluttering. And it's hard to have it settle, so one point of concentration really helps it to settle. And then mindfulness, there's the practice of mindfulness, and then there's also the quality of mindfulness, right? So the practice of mindfulness, so the word is sati, which is to remember, or really very much to remember, just to, on a certain level, to stay focused and to know what you're doing, right? And the quality of mindfulness is much more that, like the manager, the one that knows and is able to help you redirect yourself, right? So when mindfulness is settled, then mindfulness is aware of what's going on, which also could mean that it's aware of vacillation, but it just is the awareness of it, and it also can say, vacillation, is that useful, and is that something that we're doing when we're concentrating, right? Now, of course, Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, says that, so think, right? Meditation is zazen, right? Zazen, just sitting or just concentration. Literally, Zen is the Japanese pronunciation of Chan, which is the Chinese pronunciation of jhana, which is a Sanskrit word for concentration. So zazen is just concentrating, though the implication is much more just sitting, which means that when you're sitting, we tend to vacillate, right? And so first, so remember he says it's not meditation. There's Dogen for you. It's not really what you think it is. Because when we think meditation, then we're trying so hard. Like a little bit like when I was talking about Zazen instruction. Where is the balance between, right, following the instruction and then resting, right? In the ease of your body knowing how to just sit. Or your mind, your head just on top of your spine. Your chest just open. Where is it that things are as they are, you could say. However, it is helpful, right, to think of not thinking. That's concentrating. You think of this, so you don't think of that other stuff, right? And then non-thinking, right, is when you're able to let things, the thinking be thinking, the sensing be sensing, the emotion be what it is. And then, beyond thinking, or zazen really is you just You let all of that be without even having to identify it. And that's the hard thing, right? We want to know what things are, our mind, and yet our wanting to know is much more in a sense of like wanting to solve it or wanting to do something with it, wanting to achieve something, the kind of typical sense of what we think of maybe as merit, right? I want to do it right so that I can sit still, so that I can go off and be a monk or whatever, or maybe someday be in the teacher seat or whatever, right? So really kind of this grasping thing. So when we know things as they are, and we can just leave things as they are. That's grasping. That's gaining mind. And then you're settled in that, and there's no fighting it, which doesn't mean that you think that makes it okay, and then you just keep on doing it, right? There's a huge difference. So, this is supposed to be a short talk, so let me move on to, which would be sila, right? Of course, ethical conduct, as many of you know, having just finished or in the midst of finishing, if ever one finishes, studying these precepts. And a useful way of talking about it, of course, as you've heard from me, is ethical or compassionate living. So how is it that we can live in a way that's non-harming? And it does involve, right, in terms of a bigger sense of it, that it involves some sense of having a collectiveness of concentration and mindfulness, a collected sense of what's going on, awareness in a collected way, and then it involves having a wisdom or understanding of the Four Noble Truths, how causes and conditions, and also having a sense of how do we interact with each other in a way that fosters non-harming. And the last would be dana, generosity. For many of us, and it is classically correct to say that dana is translated as generosity, in the sense that it does involve giving. It involves a sense of a willingness to support something with either material gain or through the Dharma, right? So on a certain level in the Buddhist realm, dana is very much the laity, right? Give material goods to the monastics, and the monastic give the Dharma. So there's a real sense of mutuality. And this is true in all religions, really. So there's that mutuality, and in that, right, so there's material good, there's giving the Dharma, and then the last of generosity is fearlessness. Now this is a little bit harder to understand, I would say, and yet we do it all the time. Where's the fearlessness in giving, right? For a lot of us, there's a lot of fear around material good. Do I have enough? Will I be supported, right? So that's on both sides, you could say. So where's the fearlessness in being able to interact with that, right? Which doesn't, by the way, fearlessness, right, does not mean you don't have fear. Fearlessness means you have fear, or you know fear when you have fear, that is, and still you respond. Notice I didn't say act, though I wanted to say act. And still you respond, right? And this is the key, I think, in fearlessness, and in a way, the key to all the other two, is are we able to respond? Right? Can you respond when your intention is non-harming, say, and you want to speak to another member, and yet you say something and they go, and they look at you and you're like, oops, I must have said the wrong thing, right? Or it's pretty obvious that you're upset and you say something and you're regret it, right? Where is it that maybe the action is needed and you're not sure that you want to or it would be beneficial, or you see that you try to act and it didn't get the result you wanted. So where is the willingness to keep responding even though we might mess up, or where we might not know what is needed? So on a certain level, you're all coming here with huge amount of fearlessness, right? Because this is all new. We don't know who's going to show up. We don't know what conditions are, and yet we're asked to respond. In life, we're asked to respond all the time. And maybe on a certain level, this is a pretty safe, even though it was an unknown, it was pretty safe, right? And by the way, I would say Brad responded really well. He was kind of given the room to set up and did a lovely job. So nice and easy for us, right? So there's merit for Brad and for all of us. And then are we able to respond as we're meditating, right? So much of where we get tight in meditation is when you're not willing to respond, wouldn't you say? Right? When there's pain and you're like, right? You want to hang on to it in a certain way. In a way, this is grasping, right? Grasping is the unwillingness to respond. Or for many of us, it feels like the inability to respond. But really, in a way, we're taught that there's always a possibility to respond. That the choice is always there. So, and when is it that we can respond perhaps most appropriately? Is when we feel connected. This is why I would say that our practice on a certain level is how is it that we keep on staying connected in whatever is happening in the body, in the interaction, in our ideas about how things are, how people are, how the world is. So, I say today, I was trying to think, well, yes, it's a soft opening. And yet it felt like a big day. It was just a soft opening because we didn't have a lot of time to, get the word out and stuff. And yet to me, I would say that this was the bigger day, right? Because there was a lot less planning. And yet we all were willing to come and be connected in some way. And to me, that's more fearless than when there's a big crowd, or when, I don't know, when it's some grand event. Right? So I'm really grateful and feel like certainly I want to say mine, but really it's our merit has certainly ripened. Because to me, this has been a completely easeful transition. We didn't know what the heck we were doing, and it's been a lovely layout, a lovely sit together, and a sense of connectedness already. So that's my take. Thank you for listening. Anybody want to connect with me around that in any way? Including challenges. I take challenges. Sometimes in the challenges, more connections are made. Yes.
I appreciated your speaking to the fearlessness aspect of Dharma, and it just made me kind of frame it in my mind as far as having a confidence or a faith that the intentions behind my actions or responses will support the consequences or whatever results from what I put forth. It also made me think of just vulnerability, as far as just allowing myself to be vulnerable and knowing or having faith that the intentions behind my actions will support the consequences, I guess.
And I think this is where the other comes in. If your intention comes out of grounded in having studied and know the precepts, so that you know that your both your kind of mental and purposive kind of intention and your action intention, your active intention, it comes from a grounded place around that. And then, and again, our practice also gives us a grounding. When we keep touching into our body and knowing, that it's coming from a solid place, then you can respond even if, let's say, your intention, the impact of your intention is different. When you're grounded, you're going to be able to keep staying connected and interacting, which often then resolves whatever tension might come up. Yeah, great, thank you. Yes, vulnerability takes a lot of fearlessness, or fierceness, perhaps. Yes. Yes.
I appreciate your comment on finding ways to connect amidst this sort of like reversion or tightening. So I learned like through coping through like difficulty and trauma that a sure way for trauma to come back is to not connect with it. Because I think it finds a way back to you where it's asking for attention. Certain emotions, they don't go away unless they're acknowledged. So, and it's hard to also stay connected when you're feeling really scared or angry, confused. Practice has allowed me to be with a lot of change, and I think since taking the precepts, I've felt 100 times more ready to respond on time. Instead of, in the past there used to be this like unknown gap between like an event and my response, and now I can more easily go with it, which is a really powerful thing. And as a result in my life, I've been able to kind of move through transitions with much more ease and readiness.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Yeah. So I heard you said that in the past there's been a gap of not knowing?
A gap between like an event and my response. So like I maybe ignore the event, but it's still like, I still feel it, but I didn't recognize the feelings associated with the event. If that makes sense. There's a lot of dissociation.
In part, I was wondering whether, in a way, our practice is to be more at ease and not knowing. So whereas before, when, especially in trauma, things happen, there's so much going on, the really on a certain level, the classification for trauma is when something happens and there's so much happening that your body can't process it all, right? So, and so then there's a lot of not knowing, and so denial and disassociating and all that is a response to not knowing. That is a tightening up from knowing. And so in a way we practice to be more easeful in not knowing, and then paradoxically, then when we're more easeful in the not knowing, then we're able to take in more information.
And I have
Yeah.
a comment to add.
Yeah, sure.
When you bring up not knowing, I think a lot about a really powerful discussion that we had when we were talking about the cypress tree.
Mm.
And I asked you, like, where you believe change comes from. And the heart of that question was just like, there's a lot of uncertainty happening in our society and in government. Like, at what point will we start to see people respond to that or do something about it? And you said, for me, I believe that change comes in not knowing.
Mm. Okay, because I remember my answer,
Yeah.
and I was worried there.
I still remember. It still sticks with me.
Yeah.
I've been I have new responsibilities at work.
I'm sorry?
I have new responsibilities at my job,
Mm-hmm.
and I talk to my students a lot about being okay with not knowing the answer. And I'm realizing this semester in not knowing, there's a kind of dishonesty by my Italian students have, because actually I'm terrified by not knowing. And I realized that by telling them what I really think I mean, just for instance, if I'm doing improv and drama, I really kind of know. It seems like I don't know, but a part of me does know. But when I'm really not experiencing my work, there's a lot of fear. And I feel like I am trying to work things out, but I'm terrified. And I was struck by, when sitting, because I was just trying to allow things to come and go without actually thinking I was zoning in on them. Then I was actually experiencing, allowing myself to experience not knowing. And a lot of times when I'm not being clear on this, when I try to zone in on things, or think I am, I'm really just tightening up around them. I'm not really moving towards them. And that by letting go, then things were coming and going. I wasn't working them out, but they were coming and going. And I was just struck by that, because I feel like I've been thinking a lot about stuff, but in tightening up, what feels like moving towards things is also pushing them away at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I think sometimes this is why there's a difference between does one move towards things out of fear or towards things out of wanting connection, right? And so it's not so much the action; it's on a certain level it's the intention, and so we have to be careful that not knowing doesn't also become to know not knowing. Right? So I want to just, so like I want to practice not knowing so that I'm prepared when I don't know, right? On a certain level, the Boy Scout thing doesn't really work for us, right? Can we be at ease in not knowing and knowing? Right? Mostly we also grasp at knowing. This is why we want to know, because we want to grasp that who I am when I know, or who you are when I know, or who things are, or how things are when I know. And so we want to be careful that we don't use it also as, just a intellectual or kind of, yeah. And yet at the same time, this is why it isn't on a certain level just one or the other. It's how to. And here's the other thing about connection. I was talking to somebody about this earlier. In essence, on a certain level, all we're doing is we're practicing to negotiate, right? To negotiate from one side to the other. Remember, we keep talking about that. The non-duality on a certain level non-duality isn't that there isn't black and white and there's just gray. I mean, yes, sometimes I say things like that. And so there's some truth to that. But really, on a certain level, non-duality is to be able to negotiate when you're stuck at one end or the other, or stuck anywhere in there, really. And most of the way we stay stuck is we frame things as this or that, because this Maybe this is why we have two hands, right? So that we can grasp both sides and we think there's security. And yet, you know, if you want to, like, I don't know why this is coming up. If you're on the monkey bars and you want to get across, you're going to have to let go at some point. But it's that balance between when do I let go and grasp, and there's some, you know, and with doing, you gain confidence, right? And also you build up strength. Remember, I have a friend from South Africa. She had arms that were like this big, and when we were like adults, you know, at University of Oregon, and she had never been monkey bars, and so I was like holding her up, and she just didn't have the strength because they just didn't do that kind of, you know, PE in South Africa, right? And yet, you know, so there's strength involved without a doubt, right? And building up the strength to negotiate, and this is in a way our practice is we're strengthening our capacity to be with not knowing, to negotiate really with not knowing, or to negotiate with another being, or to negotiate with our fear, or to negotiate through life or with life, really. So on a certain level, it's perhaps not knowing is really trust and faith that negotiation is happening all the time, you know, whether you resist or not. When is it that you're willing to negotiate? Wow, so much for Dharma light, huh? I thought this would be Dharma light. And,
I have a light question.
yes. Is it
For-
Connie? Is it?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. For sila or ethical conduct,
Mhm.
I just missed, I think I missed some component of it. So I heard awareness of the collective and interacting in a way that is non-harmful. I'm not sure if I caught everything. I feel you spent the less time on that part than me.
Yeah, because a lot of these people just went through. So there are different ways of talking about sila or ethical conduct, and the most basic way and traditional way is the precepts. So like not killing, not lying, not stealing, not misusing sexuality, and not, what's the other main fifth one? No, Dealing, yeah. So someone came up and told me one of those words might be anti-Semitic, so I'm gonna have to figure out another way to negotiate that. So that's the basic, but really they're really, on one level they can be thought of as, you know, rules or very clear boundaries, and then another way is how they help us to be aware of what we're doing around those, and then also how is it from a place of, in a way, when we're fearless, right? When we're fearless, then why would we even need to lie? If we're fearless, why would we need to kill, right? So, I mean, just to tie it into what I was saying, so, yeah, and fundamental to it, there are parameters to help us see how can we live in harmony with each other, because that's the one that's very directly interactive. For us, most of us think of generosity as something I do. When really, you know, in the Buddhist sense, it's really about mutuality, right? And then for most of us in the West, also meditation, we think that's something I do. And yet, in the ethical conduct, of course, most of us think, well, I don't lie, I don't want to. But after a while, it's obviously, you know, yeah, if you're in a room by yourself, you can lie to yourself all you want or something. But it's when you meet another being that, you know, that really comes alive. Yeah, sure. All right. So is it time to go connect and interact with other beings in the room for a little, what time?